For my Year 12 major project, I effectively produced a 3D animation short film with additional incorporations of 2D animation, special effects, and audio production. I began this project with modeling the bedroom, the primary environment of the film. To gain the correct room proportions, I used the measurements of a real queen bed in the scaling of the project's bed. Under the Physics tab, cloth simulation was used on the blanket, which was a highly subdivided plane, with various imperfections added to the mesh for a realistic appearance. The pillows also used cloth simulation with a pressure of 3 to produce an inflated look. By ensuring collisions were applied on all impacting surfaces, all simulations effectively interacted with the mattress. While the same cloth simulation process was utilized when constructing the curtains, the degree of difficulty was elevated as vertex groups and the addition of pleats were incorporated. For the window and door frame, a polymodeling process was used, adding and manipulating mesh through extrusion and scaling to form desired room structures. This same technique was used to model the majority of the environment's furniture and props, using references of real furniture to produce highly authentic furnishing. To further elevate modeling skills, various modifiers including subdivision surfaces, solidifiers, mirrors, and bevels were used during this process. From here, all furnishings were prepared for material application and texturing. Each prop was individually UV unwrapped, adding seams in appropriate areas to assist in properly unwrapping the mesh. Following this, a multitude of materials were experimented with to successfully texture each prop to fit the desired look. From here, I began with the modeling of a 3D character as the central figure for the film. To achieve a more realistic and natural appearance, sculpting was the decided form of modeling. However, this required previously drawn references scaled to the correct size to assist with proportions. For all components of the head and body, I used a cube with high subdivisions for the base geometry to minimize the possible issues with triangles or n-gons. To maintain symmetry and efficiency, symmetry was turned on and mirror modifiers were used on all limbs. Once the base object is in position, the basic form is established, making sure to consistently use X and Y views to align with references. First, I block in the basic shape of features to gain an understanding of the 3D composition before later developing features in further detail while incorporating my own stylistic choices along the way. Once I was happy with the sculpted model, I moved on to utilizing the Boolean modifier to connect all segments of the body without impairing the mesh. Before this, it was essential to apply all subdivision and mirror modifiers to ensure all mesh exists permanently within the scene. The modifier must be added to the mesh above and then applied as a union to the mesh below to avoid unwanted mesh removal. At this stage, the mesh can deform, which was resolved by remeshing the model at a voxel size of 0.002, and then smoothing out the indents with the sculpting tools to produce a seamless transition between body parts. Now that the character modeling was completed, an armature rigging system was applied to the mesh. This was done using a complex human meta rig supplied by an add-on called Rigify. The add-on generates all required bones for the rig, which I then carefully position into the necessary placements. Through Rigify buttons, I selected the generated rig and subsequently parented it to the mesh with automatic weights. Initially, mesh density was too high for the functionality of the rig and was readjusted through remeshing to balance a high-quality appearance with an operational rigging system. With a fully rigged character and modeled environment, I moved on to the first shot sequence of the film, the death scene. To increase efficiency and reduce time rendering, I decided to put multiple shots into one sequence. Objects were animated in and out of the scene by keyframing the scale between 0 and 1. For lighting, a sky texturing node was added into the world shading, and the sun angle and elevation were keyframed to simulate time change as the sequence progressed. The girl was then animated to perform a small consistent typing motion, moving the character's hands up and down, swaying the shoulders left and right using the rig controls. Halfway through the sequence, the controls were used to move the character to pick up a mug, which required studying of real movement to effectively simulate realistic motion. For the skin, procedural texturing developed with Blender was used. A combination of nodes allowed for the manipulation of skin coloring and texturing. For the hair, stylistic choices favored particle simulation. This was done by setting a particle simulation to the hair and assigning it to a vertex group made on the head. For the appropriate volume, emission length and strand steps were set while enabling children interpolated. A collision was then applied to the girl's mesh and hair dynamics was turned on, changing all settings including vertex mass, stiffness, dampening, roughness random and threshold, and collision distance. The sequence now needed to be rendered. A farm of 17 school computers rendered out the scene in a PNG sequence set to 4K resolution. These processes were then applied to the rest of the scenes throughout the film. Once all shots were created and rendered, the PNG sequences were imported into Adobe Media Encoder and compiled into QuickTime videos with the preset Apple ProRes 422. All the necessary clips were then imported into a new Adobe Premiere Pro file, ready for editing. The royalty-free instrumental and the clips were added into the timeline and positioned to line up with the timing of the music. For the sequences with multiple sections, each were cut at points of transition and organized into allocated groups, each with their own adjustment layers to add special effects and gradually darken shots as the film progressed. An audio recording device was used to record special effects that were later cut up and positioned to align with the musical requirements. Various other edits were made to finish the video editing, such as keyframing zooms, changing speed of clips, and keyframing volume. Finally, the file was exported in a QuickTime format for the highest quality, and the project was completed.